If you think it is easier and cheaper just to send an email, you could be shortchanging yourself and missing out on a lot of opportunities. Today, we are talking about all the pitfalls you need to avoid, as well as the pros of using email as a communication tool. Stick with me, and by the end, you're going to know all my tips and tricks and what I do when things go bad. And stay to the end as I'll share a story of how an email that was meant to try to rebuild a relationship ended up ruining it entirely. So let's start with a really important point whenever you're using email, which is the importance of building rapport. So it's interesting because most of us know that in real life, if you're meeting somebody, you say, hi, good morning, how was your trip here? What did you eat for breakfast? How are your kids? What was your weekend like? But it somehow doesn't seem to translate for many people in email. In email land, people usually just say, hey, and get right to the point. But research has shown that this is a mistake. There is research that has been done by Janice Nadler at Northwestern that has shown, if you look at negotiation outcomes, that there is a significant difference in both the frequency of negotiated outcomes and the amount of value created between parties who build rapport in their email exchanges and parties who get immediately to business. So you may be wondering, what do you mean by build rapport? It's pretty simple. Literally saying something like, Dear McKay, hope you had a really good weekend. Or, Dear Cynthia, how are your kids doing? So one or two sentences that show some concern for the other person, their life, that shows that you kind of have been thinking of them or remembering them. That's all that's required. And that makes a really big difference in terms of making the other person feel seen and heard, and then how the negotiation or how the series of communications goes afterwards. Second, keeping your email short, simple, and clear. Now, at some level, right, I think we all get this. When you are on the receiving side in an email and you open it up, and if you see paragraphs and paragraphs of text, if you're like most people, you're like, oh my gosh, I don't have time for this right now. You either ignore it, or if it's possible, you delete it, or if it's like from your boss or somebody that you really do need to respond to, you remark it as unread and come back to it later. That's how we experience it when we're receiving it. We need to remember that when we are writing the email, that a short email that is very clear on the points and simple is usually received much better on the other side. There are a few other tips I want to add here. So using bolding or underlining, for example, if there's a date or a time, or if there are 3 or 4 points, numbering them and putting each topic in bold. The idea is you want to be communicating that you're respectful of the other person's time. You want to highlight their eyes to the most important key points, and you want to avoid them just getting utterly confused. Now, one thing I want to say about this, right? Because again, I think if you're listening, you're like, this is totally intuitive. But I think another reason why we get stuck is that sometimes we tend to turn to email as a communication tool precisely when we feel like we have a lot of information when we want to convey, or at times when we feel like when we are in a conversation with someone, they tend to interrupt us. So we say, I know, I'll put it all in an email, and then they will have it loud and clear. And the problem with that is you may have intended to communicate all of this, but they're not reading it, they're not seeing it clearly, and they're just getting lost. So in situations especially where you're feeling anxiety about communicating a lot because you do think it's important, and where you feel like the other person doesn't give you a chance to talk in person or has more power in the relationship than you do, that's all the more reason why you want to keep your emails short, simple, and clear. Third, there is a huge amount of research that has shown that there is a higher incidence of what we call misattribution of intentions when communications occur over email versus when they occur in person or over the phone. So what do I mean by misattribution of intentions? It means that we are more likely to read and receive a message and assume negative intentionality when that happens over email than when it happens in an in-person conversation. Why is that the case? So when we're communicating in person, we have a lot more data by which we can read their intentions. If their arms are crossed, right? If they have a furrowed brow, if they're pointing at us, if they're looking away, that's all data that helps us understand what they mean. That's more than just the words, right? We also have the benefit of tone. Is it sarcastic? Is it joking? Is it warm? Is it acerbic? Well, all of that goes away when we're using email. All we have is what they wrote. And the challenge here is that we are much more likely, especially in a situation where there's been some bad history, maybe some misunderstanding, to read whatever they write in a way that frames them in the least sympathetic way. I think all of us have had the experience, I know I certainly have, of reading an email and thinking like, oh my gosh, I can't even believe that they said this. So what does misunderstanding intention look like? Well, I think we've all had that time when we've gotten an email maybe from a work colleague or a friend and we thought like, what? And then what we do, right, is we may pass it around to 2 or 3 or 4 of our friends and say, what do you make of this, right? And everybody wanting to support us ends up interpreting it in the most negative light. This is why we want to really be careful when we're using email. And it really goes to my 4th point, which is when there is misunderstanding, when there is mistrust, we want to actually stop using email and go back to in-person communication. This may be counterintuitive. I got to tell you, so many times in the work that I do, someone says to me, well, I think what I'll do now that I've talked with you, Bob, is I'll write them an email so I can express myself clearly. I get that instinct, but what I want to say is, no. I think what you really need to do is go back and see if you could get them on the phone or over Zoom or even better, in person. You know, there's this really, for me, kind of sad story. Many years ago, this is like literally 15 years ago, I ended a dating relationship. It didn't go so well the way I handled it. And I was really hoping to restart at least a friendship with this person. And so I sent them an email, right? Maybe a mistake, trying to explain like why I did what I did, why I made the decision that I did, and my real hope that we can continue a friendship. So then weeks and weeks go by, and nothing, and I was really surprised given the history of our relationship. And then suddenly I get this email from the person. It was about 4 sentences long. It was neither angry, nor sympathetic, nor hopeful, nor sad. To be honest, it made almost no sense. And my conclusion is that what had happened is this person, and knowing this person, had written something like a tome to me, and then put it by her many friends to get their feedback. And everyone did their own editing. And what was left was a few incoherent sentences that made sense to this person because they knew all the missing lines. And to me made no sense at all. And so it was this example of not being clear, being totally confusing, not building any rapport. And to be honest, it was the last communication I had with this person. Build rapport over emails. Keep it short, simple, and clear. Remember the higher likelihood of misattribution of intentions over email. And because of that, when things go bad, move from email to either in person or Zoom or phone. So if you want to learn more about how to be better in negotiation and communication, keep watching this next video, which is what is the most important negotiation skill. Okay, you want to know that skill? Hit the button.